In the news this week, masks are good. The expert argument against popular opinion with calls to spend the record surplus on high-quality masks. An exclusive of AMA's Dr. Karina Powles.
Concerns over Clive Palmer's major campaign ad spend as Prime Minister Scott Morrison calls an election.
A cancer patient shares her hardship as COVID restrictions stop her loved ones from helping.
Former ABC veteran journalist exclusively critiques Leo's interview, plus Dr. Andrew Miller's comment.
This is The Evening News with Ivan Loom and Maliva Thorne.
Good evening. Masks are good for the community. That's the latest response from a leading WA doctor. As the public's fatigue with COVID restrictions grows, masks continue to be the vital frontline ending WA's latest COVID wave, reducing pressure on the hospital system and preventing ambulance ramping. There are also questions as to whether the state government should use the record $8 billion surplus to provide free, high-quality masks for every Western Australian. AMA's Dr. Karina Powles joined me exclusively in her rare on-camera interview. Dr. Karina Powles, thanks for joining us this week. First, to the mask rules that many people just want to ditch the mask, but my understanding, your argument is that masks are good for the community and is needed to. What's your take on it?
Well, masks are good for the community to prevent disease and shorten this wave that we're having. They prevent people getting infected and all the acute illness that comes with that, and also the long-term illness that can come with that. The hospitalisations and the ramping, it all gets a bit easier if people reduce the spread of the disease by wearing masks.
But the argument is out there saying that because people don't want to wear masks at the office, they felt very uncomfortable, so therefore they choose to work at home instead. And as a result, there are less people in the city, the hospitality and the businesses are suffering, therefore there are lost jobs, and that's a vicious death spiral, and their view is ditch the masks and everything will go back to normal. What's your view on that?
The strange thing is, I've heard of surveys that have shown the opposite effect, that people are more comfortable to go back into the workplace if people are wearing masks during a wave. So I'm not particularly sure about how that survey was conducted, but what I would say is generally if people know that there are practical mitigations that are being put in place to care for their health, they will feel more confident and less anxious about attending the workplace in person.
Ambulance ramping, infections and masks, what are the correlations?
People are not wearing masks, it's far more easy for the disease to spread between them. And then we have more people who are unwell, who may need ambulance to be called. And so that creates extra stress on the ambulance system and the hospital system that didn't need to be there because there was a simple lever to put in place, which was wear a mask. If people are not feeling comfortable in the masks, then a better quality mask, such as a P2 or an N95, they're actually really technically termed respirators, but they are quite easy to breathe through and more comfortable for many people, and certainly have an increased level of protection against catching the SARS-CoV-2 virus. So yes, masks are very important to decrease the load of illness in our community, and that thereby decreases stress on our ambulance system. And also it protects staff themselves from having to stay home from looking after their own families who are unwell or being home themselves unwell. So it decreases the amount of staff loss for ambulance or a hospital workplace.
The most important question I think a lot of people ask is the state government has forecast of $8 billion in surplus. Masks are not cheap. So do you believe the state budget should allocate high quality masks and P2s and such as the rest to be given every citizen in Western Australia? What's your take on it?
I think that would certainly help many people. I mean, when I walk around the city now, people are still in cloth masks, which don't provide such a good level of prevention. And I see people in poorly fitting surgical masks, those blue masks. So there's plenty of things that can be done to improve the quality of mask, and if the government could provide masks to the populace, N95, P2, KF94, any of good quality controlled respirators, really they're called, that are in production, then that will go a long way to shortening this wave. They've got a significant improvement on disease prevention against a poorly fitting surgical mask, for instance.
Karina, I know that you don't often go into the media to have a yarn, but thanks for joining us exclusively this week.
It's a pleasure.
Concerns continue over billionaire Clive Palmer's ability to tilt the election with massive campaign spending as Prime Minister Scott Morrison calls an election.
The gloves are well and truly off before the starting gun fire as Liberals fight hard to catch up amongst souring opinion polls.
Earlier today I visited His Excellency the Governor-General and advised him to call an election for the House of Representatives and half of the Senate on May 21. This election is about you, no one else. It's about our country and it's about its future. And above all, this election, as all elections are, this election is a choice. It's a choice between a strong economy and a Labor opposition that would weaken it. It's a choice between an economic recovery that is leading the world and a Labor opposition that would weaken it. Our government is not perfect. We've never claimed to be. But we are up front. And you may see some flaws, but you can also see what we have achieved for Australia in incredibly difficult times. And you can see our plan. Our plan will deliver more and better jobs and the lowest unemployment seen in some 50 years. Our plan does deliver tax relief, and it does deliver that for workers and for small businesses to help you get ahead and ensure that you can deal with the cost of living pressures right here, right now.
This election will determine whether we can come together to build a better future. We can seize that opportunity, but you have to vote for it. And that is what this election is about, building a better future. We are a great country, but we can be even better if we have a better government. We've had a difficult couple of years. Australians have been magnificent in making sacrifices to overcome the challenges of the pandemic, of floods, of bushfires. It has shown the strength of our society, but it's also shown our vulnerabilities of our economy and where we need to make improvement. So as we emerge from this, Australians deserve better. This government doesn't have an agenda for today, let alone a vision for tomorrow. We can and we must do better. The pandemic has given us the opportunity to imagine a better future, and Labor has the policies and plans to shape that future.
I mean, Clive Palmer has shown that he's only ever about Clive Palmer. But when push comes to shove, I don't doubt that he'll be directing his votes towards Conservative parties. That's what he did last time too. Clive Palmer will spend who knows how much in this election campaign, but at the end of the day, it's only ever Clive Palmer standing up for Clive Palmer.
Federal Labor leader Anthony Albanese finally gets to hang out with Premier Mark McGowan 3 weeks after Scott Morrison stole the glory. The Albo-McGowan pair went for a 1.5-day blitz in Perth, targeting health and transport issues. Steve Anderson reports.
Prime Minister Scott Morrison Adam's there. The Cabinet got the cream after stealing the show from Anthony Albanese by appearing first with the WA Premier Mark McGowan.
It's great to be here with Premier McGowan as well.
Following much anticipation and media speculation, the Albo-McGowan pair finally appeared in public together. From health and transport to shopping mall tours, Mr Albanese got 1.5 days with Premier Mark McGowan just before the official election bell.
We can have politicians get out and about. Yesterday with the Premier, we went to Westfield Carousel for some period of time. There in the electorate of Swan, we engaged with many dozens of people during that visit.
For the last 2 weeks, it has been awkward for the Labor Party to front media questions following bullying allegations from Kimberley Kitching. This week, many sweeteners and promises were made by Mr Albanese with Metronet funding, screening for newborn babies, followed by job training announcements with Tanya Plibersek.
Will invest $3 million in a new trades training centre here at Ellenbrook Secondary. This would be the first stage in designing and developing a fantastic proposal that the school has to make sure that more Australians have the opportunity of getting a trade.
It remains to be seen whether the McGowan factor can carry enough weight to tilt the election. Steve Anderson, WAMN News.
Ukrainians continued their protest in Perth this weekend following massacre allegations in the town of Bucha. The demonstration comes after the United Nations revoked Russia from the Human Rights Council over the week, as Putin's media advisor conceded the massive loss of army personnel, but refused to admit the massive killings. The protest in Perth took place in Forest Chase, and demonstrators are joined by Labor MP Anna Lee and Greens WA Senator Dorinda Cox.
All the rest of the world is united against him. That really is the message, that the world and we in Perth are standing united against this tyranny of Putin.
A cancer patient almost broke down in tears in front of the media this week after describing the struggles of not having her loved one's care due to hospital COVID restrictions. Lauren Kinnard described her hardship as she can't have her daughter accompanying her to attend chemotherapy sessions, forcing her to wait outside for 3 hours every time. The opposition has raised the issue in Parliament, demanding a compassionate approach as the McGowan Government reduces public health measures.
It beggars belief that a chemo patient cannot have her daughter visit and support her during this treatment.
That's hard to put into words. I just cry a lot. A lot. My anxiety levels have gone through the roof. I can't even talk about it without getting like this. It doesn't help the recovery. You know, you have to stay as positive as you can, as upbeat. You know, look to all the fantastic things around you, and I'm not seeing them because this is consuming.
There's a sigh of relief this week after the Reserve Bank kept the interest rate just above zero. Although the cash rate has been left on hold at 0.1%, the survey shows that 3/4 of homeowners who pay mortgages will have to cut their spending at a cash rate of 1.25%. Mortgage brokers said it's important for people to review their spending.
So expenses can be categorized to, your fixed expenses, your debt expenses such as, your mortgage, your credit cards, and also your discretionary and your entertainment expenses. So once you have identified those expenses, then you can review it. For example, with your debt expenses, with your mortgage, have a chat with your local, finance broker, and they'll be able to tell you, what is the best rate out there.
This week on the WMN Extra News Club, we continue to profile 6 News journalism whiz kid Leo Polisi after securing one of the most anticipated interviews in the country, a 14-year-old's interview with the Prime Minister. After enjoying the media frenzy, what does the future hold for 6 News and youth crews around the nation?
You have to give props to the PM and his team for doing the interview. I mean, to get an interview with the Prime Minister, you're not a major network, you're asking for an in-depth one, you're a 13-year-old and myself a 14-year-old, and it's weeks out from an election. I mean, that's extraordinary. And again, I think his team took us seriously. I don't think they were expecting the tough questions. I don't think they were expecting silly little kid questions either. I can imagine they were more focusing on news of the day kind of things, not this lies and falsehoods thing. But I'm glad we went there because it's extraordinary to see some of his answers.
You can read and watch all that plus more on the WMN Extra News Club. Subscribe to the link attached to this post and support independent local journalism.
Extreme weather is something none of us ever want to be caught up in, but the latest revelation from the Hubble Space Telescope offers some truly fascinating insights into giant exoplanets thousands of light years away. The latest discovery shows ultra-hot exoplanets are filled with gas as hot as 1,648 degrees Celsius. The heat is enough to vaporize most metals, including titanium, and the rain can vaporize rocks on one planet. These bizarre weather situations are made possible due to the planet's close orbit to its sun, making them possibly the hottest planet atmospheres ever discovered.
As much as I love astronomy, and I know you do too, you don't ever want to be stuck on one of those planets.
No, Melly, you don't want to go there. Recap this week's top stories again in just a moment.
But right now, here's Steve Anderson with Western Perspective.
Thanks, Ivan and Melly. Welcome to Western Perspective. I'm Steve Anderson. Well, it was the interview that had the whole country talking. The 14-year-old boy from 6 News who often appears on this program got to grill the Prime Minister. Leo Puglisi's interview was combative, feisty but objective as he addressed the issue of transparency when it comes to leadership. From his track record of truthfulness to the issue of climate change, youth mental health and post-COVID economic recovery, Leo did not shy away from the difficult questions. It's hard enough for a seasoned journalist to have the opportunity to question the Prime Minister, let alone a 14-year-old independent journalist. This week, former veteran ABC political journalist Peter Kennedy exclusively critiqued Leo's interview and why both Leo and the Prime Minister deserve a big tick. Peter, thanks very much for joining us. Over the past 30 years, you've interviewed many politicians. What do you make of Leo's interview?
Well, I think the boys did very well. The questions were very pertinent and frank. Actually, they were very direct. So full marks to them for the questions. They didn't pull their punches, and they put the Prime Minister on the spot. I think he had to do some quick thinking at times, but he of course was not lost for words.
Well, Leo certainly didn't give the Prime Minister an easy ride, did he?
Well, it wasn't. The interview wasn't an easy ride for ScoMo. The issue of his integrity came up. They didn't sort of beat around the bush with regard to his integrity, so they put it straight to him. And what about the reaction of young people? How's he going to get the support of young people? So to some extent, they bounced him round, which is good to see. It's good to see a Prime Minister or a political leader being asked direct questions. There were follow-up questions, which is often overlooked in other interviews. Follow-up questions, if the question wasn't answered specifically, then just sort of dive in and have another go. Look, they did well, and I think the Prime Minister enjoyed it. If the Prime Minister thought he was going to get an easy ride from a couple of teenagers, he would have been mistaken, but I think he rose to the challenge too. It was pretty clear what his line was, by the way, and what he thinks are his government's strengths, particularly when it comes to the economy, employment and issues like that, and that's what he'd like the election campaign to be fought on. Whether that's the case or not remains to be seen, but I think he sees that as a strength for the government, but of course the election is about a whole lot of things as well.
Do you feel that the Prime Minister has come off well from this interview?
Well, look, full marks for the Prime Minister for making himself available to some teenagers asking the questions. It's hard enough for seasoned journalists to get to the Prime Minister, but I think full marks for him to making himself available. He didn't take the interview lightly, and nor should he have, so I think he will. I think he gets a tick. He gets a tick for number one, making himself available. Number two, treating the questions seriously, as they should have been, and because they were good questions. And number three, obviously he took the opportunity to promote his government. Who wouldn't? And he thinks he's got a good story to tell, but at the moment he's got a lot of ground to make up too.
So 14 years old and he's already interviewed the Prime Minister. That's something that many journalists have not accomplished. What do you have to say regarding that?
Well, he's done very well, and I think the future will be very promising. If he can keep that up and he retained his enthusiasm. His manner was very good. The questions were very good. He was courteous, but the questions were pointed. And a good interviewer has those qualities.
Yes, and he certainly has those qualities. Peter Kennedy, thanks for your time.
My pleasure.
And now, here is AMAWA spokesman Dr. Andrew Miller with his weekly COVID-19 update and commentary.
Hi, thanks for your time. Moving into federal election cycle now, and it's very important, I think, to be considering how parties, how independents are considering managing what we're seeing as a COVID plateau now. So we've gone perhaps over a bit of a peak, but it's not going back to zero anywhere around the country. Still now with 2,400 people in hospital. Fiona Stanley has around 800 beds. So that gives you some indication that there's 3 of those hospitals full of people at the moment with COVID, and the case numbers are not coming down rapidly. So we will still be dealing with this for some time, and that's going to affect not only deaths and also long-term illness, long COVID for some of those people, but it also affects everything else that the health system's trying to do, which was underfunded going into COVID in the first place. So try to be looking for parties that are going to pump some money into that health system, and you might say, well, what about the economy? What about, or everything else that we do in life? Those things are dependent on your health. And if you want to run a cafe, you'll know that even if there's no restrictions around, if people are worried that they're going to catch disease, then they tend to stay away. Just ask the scuba diving industry, who saw the effect of great white shark attacks and what that has done to their industry. Even though scuba diving certainly hasn't been banned, it's not as popular as it used to be. So we need to talk about long-term control and issues like whether we can have a centre for disease control, which is not involved, or doesn't have politicians involved in the decisions around these things, but just the scientists, the ones who can keep it under control. Certainly in perspective with the rest of what we do in society, but now that we have these very, very good vaccines, we know that they're essential, but they're not quite enough to keep it under control. And we've got to continue to have people who will make decisions to control transmission, to protect all of those who are vaccinated and those who cannot yet be vaccinated, particularly those under 5 years of age. So thanks very much for your time, and happy 95th birthday to my mum Elaine. Thanks for your time.
And that's WP for this week. We'll be back again next time, but for now, it's back to you, Ivan and Melly.
Thanks, Steve. And here is Leo with what's coming up on 6 News tonight.
Thanks, guys. Today on 6 News, the federal election looms as fallout continues from Scott Morrison's interview with 6 News. The PM claiming that the media has taken him out of context, but we've got archived videos that may just disprove what he said. Plus, condemnation grows after scores of people, including children, were killed and wounded by a rocket strike on a railway station in eastern Ukraine. And Hillsong founder Brian Houston hits out of the church after his wife, Bobby Houston, was reportedly made redundant. You can see full details on those stories and plenty more by heading to our YouTube channel. Just search 6 News Australia to find us, or our website 6newsau.com. For now, though, guys, it's back to you.
Thanks, Leo. And that's our weekly news and current affairs, with the latest news on our website, wamnnews.com.au.
Don't forget to subscribe to the WAMN Extra News Club so we can continue our work in the community. Full details on wamnews.com.au/news/extra. From Melly and myself, wish you good health, good night, see you next Sunday.
Thanks for watching.